Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Thanks for watching the show, and today we are going to do another Distro Wars, and we are going to look at Linux Mint Debian Edition, LMDE, versus Debian, the grandfather of the Linux world. And before we dive on in, you can help support the channel if you'd like by heading on over to shop.switchedtolinux.com to get some Switch to Linux stuff. We got some t-shirts and mouse pads and backpacks and coffee cups and things. So we have RMRF No Preserve Root September 2018 Code of Conduct. We also have Switch to Linux, you fool. We have some cats in tinfoil hats. So all sorts of fun stuff over there at shop.switchedtolinux.com. But with that, let's go ahead and dive on over into the topic. So we're going to be looking at Linux Mint Debian Edition versus Debian. And I wanted to kind of start by looking at the websites, because one of the factors you might consider Linux Mint Debian Edition is if you are newer in the Linux world, but at the same time want more of a classic, maybe a little bit less user-friendly entry into the Linux world, but at the same time, you don't want to be fighting too much with it. We have a little interestingness going on here. So, of course, I installed Debian, where we have a choice of what to install with Debian. I installed it with the same Cinnamon desktop environment that we're going to have in Linux Mint Debian Edition, leading us to the pros and the cons. The pros of your LMDE is that it's going to be easier to install. It is easier to find the download, land on the page, linuxmint.com, and you can actually go right on over to the LMDE or just click on the download page and you should be able to find what you need. Actually, I think you do need to go to the LMDE for the download here. You can download the 64 or the 32-bit. You only have a single option, and that's going to give you the Cinnamon desktop environment. You are going to get newer versions, despite Debian right now is a newer version. This is another little caveat to this video. Linux Mint Debian Edition is still running Debian 9, but Debian itself is on Debian 10. So if you're watching this right about the time we're doing this video, that is one of the things we are going to have to keep in mind, is that Debian has already rolled. Linux Mint Debian Edition is just preparing to roll. And so, of course, if you know that if you're in the Arch world, it kind of rolls like daily. I mean, I just installed updates yesterday, and I think I still have like 50 updates to install today. That's how fast Arch works. Debian rolls about as quick as an Ice Age does. It'll get there, might be a couple years out. We're only on the second or third Debian since I've been in Linux, and that's been a while. And Linux Mint Debian Edition rolls sometime after that Debian is done. And so we are going to be comparing an older version of Debian with the Linux Mint version versus the newer version of Debian on our raw Debian. One of the little caveats that I can't really do much about, but it's worth worth mentioning here. Now, we do, despite Linux Mint Debian Edition is the older version, it actually is running the latest version of Cinnamon versus Debian is not. We're going to see that when we actually boot into the virtual machines. Now, back to the cons on Debian. I defy you to figure out how to download Debian to install, because this has got to be the worst, like the least user-friendly site in the Linux world. We have a whole lot of things. Of course, we have the getting over here, but you're looking at this going, what do I do? I don't even know what I do. There's a network installed. There's the CD, USB, ISO images, there's CD vendors, there's pre-installed Pure Blends Debian packages. There's also the getting Debian view, which drops you onto this page here, and it's just balls of text, and you don't know what you're doing. You can download an installation image, download a small image, download a 64 or 32-bit net installer. We have torrents for 32-bit. We have torrents for DVDs, 32, 64-bit. We can try a live key over here. We can buy a computer with Debian pre-built. There's some cloud images. It's actually difficult to figure out. Now, if you dig deep enough, you can even also find things that will have, you can also find versions of Debian that have the non-free repositories already unlocked for you and things like that. What does all that mean? Well, one of the downsides of Debian is sometimes you do need to fight with it to get your hardware working, because it does follow, like Fedora, a pure open source philosophy at its core, meaning that there will be nothing proprietary on your computer, which is actually good, but there's going to be some hardware equipment that may not work well. Linux Mint Debian Edition by the Linux Mint team everything's generally going to work very well out of the box because they enable those non-free repositories out of the box. And so for me, what I did here is I just went over and I downloaded the 64-bit net installer because I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And the net installer, if you know what you're doing and you know how to get everything installed, is going to be your best way to go. So with all that, we are going to go ahead and dive on into these distros. We're going to look at Linux Mint Debian Edition first, and then we're going to go ahead then and look at the raw Debian second. And I'm going to, one of the things I did is to test Qt versus GTK applications. We have GIMP and Evolution installed as our GTK samples, and we have FileZilla and Sigil installed as our Qt samples. And we're going to go ahead and get these guys booted up as soon as we're ready to go. And I am going to have to change the screen resolution on Linux Mint Debian Edition because even with the guest editions installed, it is not reloading itself full screen for me. So that's a virtual machine thing, the fact I'm using an old virtual machine. Oh, wow, it actually did work for me. Shocking. I actually did not anticipate that. Let's go ahead and have a look. Of course, our colors are bad on our desktop background. That's actually the bad coloration there is actually due to the VirtualBox guest editions. So don't worry about the weird coloration on the background. In fact, if I can probably change that and it'll fix itself. Let's go ahead and change the desktop background to something else. There we are. There we are. Now we're back. Now on to Linux Mint Debian Edition. One of the great things is you have this nice welcome screen when you boot up. You don't get one of these on Debian. So you can show it or hide it at startup. There is the first step, sets up system snapshots, installs your multimedia codecs. That's something else that Debian doesn't do for you out of the box. We're just going to go ahead and install those, enter my super secret password that's definitely not 123. And that guy is going to install everything. Well, that's doing its installation process. We can go and load up our update manager. I already ran our updates. Now, since this is running a new version of Cinnamon, we have the option, do we want to go with a traditional Cinnamon desktop layout, which is going to look like this one here, a little bit smaller of a screen. We have quick launch bars over here. Everything that is open shows up on our panel. This is actually my preferred, but I do actually like the larger sizes and things of the modern, and I actually have a video about how to convert your modern to the old standard while keeping the new stylistic designs and things. So you do have an option inside of this one because it is running the latest version of Cinnamon. We also have various system settings. We have a software manager that the Linux Mint software manager and the Linux Mint updater is absolutely amazing. One of the best. We have Flatpaks installed, installations here. We can sort by the various types of items that we are looking for. And as far as our system updates, we can come over here. It's reminding us to set up snapshots. It's reminding us to do a local mirror. We can turn those guys off if we want to, but we can also do things. Let's see. I think this one does not allow us to do the kernel adjustments, I think. Yeah, the Linux Mint Debian Edition does not allow us to do the kernel adjustments, but let's go ahead and see what version of kernel we are running. So we are running 4.9 on Linux Mint Debian Edition. Overall, the theming of the system is very nice. It's what we'd expect from Mint. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it actually does look very nice. We are having issues with my menu there. I'm not sure why that was. No, I don't want that. Okay. We can come up here into themes, and I believe we can choose a different type of theme settings. So we do have all of our basic colorations and theme options. So any highlight colors for controls, for backgrounds. We also have a variety of different themes installed. So we do have the nice elegance of Linux Mint involved in here. As far as some of the software, we are going to have a little bit older software versions simply because of the fact that this guy is running the older version of Debian. Of course, our web browser is going to be very new and modern, but our GIMP, you'll see, is a little bit older. Go ahead and close this guy out here. Close those tabs. Let's switch this guy to the single window mode and just have a look at what this application is going to look like. So we're going to look at this, and we're also going to look at evolution for our GTK applications. So, of course, GIMP here, it's giving us nice theming. Of course, we do have the option. In fact, the newer version of GIMP, it actually has its own theming options. So you'd actually have to go into, I think it's under your preferences, and you can change your theme settings around. So here we just have the theme settings between the larger and the small icons. Everything else matches the system themes. What we find on the newer version of GIMP is the ability to control the themes independently. So very much like GIMP is doing the same thing that Kden Live does, where it picks its own themes. It doesn't care what your system's running. But you can always check the system. All right, we're going to, no, all right, evolution. I'm going to have to pull that up again and walk through a couple steps there. Okay, next. I wanted to get into it. We're not, okay, what am I doing here? Come on, evolution. On the Debian version of evolution, it's like wanting me to restore from a backup. I don't want to restore from a backup. All right, that's fine. Bob at bob.bob. How's that? No, we're not going to look up email servers. I was hoping I could get into evolution on this version without actually going through all this mess, because it's... Let's just see if I can get something running, even if it's going to fail. We're just going to get stuff to run. Next, apply. There we are. Now we'll get evolution open. Newer versions of evolution, you don't have to go through all that nonsense. But you'll see, once again, everything is matching our theming just fine. So 2 GTK applications, everything does seem to work. Very nice, very united. Our 2 applications for Qt, let's have a look at FileZilla, and we will also have a look at Sigil. All right, so this guy over here, again, no problems at all. Very seamless, very flawless. Everything looks good. And if we change our basic system themes, then we will have the ability basically to see how everything else is going to work. So let's go ahead and change our system themes. Okay, we're going to go with some red highlights here. All right, so now changing everything over to red. Everything is still matching very nicely. There's our Qt. Let's go ahead and open up our GIMP again. Once again, everything is following our system theme perfectly. So Linux Mint Debian Edition does a very good job of installing everything, getting the whole system to work right. Everything does look good, except I still hate the Linux Mint icons. I do prefer those newer ones. Overall, we get a very nice system. It's going to have, like I said, it does have your non-free repositories enabled. What that's going to mean is that drivers that are not open source, more proprietary things will be installed. Some people have a big deal about that. Some people just prefer their system to work. So that's what we're getting on Linux Mint Debian Edition. So now we'll actually go ahead and jump on over and look at our real Debian build. And here we are on Debian. So we are running Debian Cinnamon, and right out of the box, you see that we are running the older version of Cinnamon. Our menu doesn't have a nice menu icon here, and it doesn't have quite as nice theming as the other one did out of the box. We'll go ahead and explore if we have more theming options available. I honestly don't remember. So looking at our backgrounds and things, we do have a number of backgrounds we could choose from. So let's go with a good old classic Debian background. There we are. We'll go with a good old classic Debian background. Overall, the theming of this out of the box, it really does look pretty atrocious. we don't have desktop icons on the system at the install. We actually can add them back on. If we go into desktop settings, we can turn these guys on if we want to. I'll just turn on the ones that I like to turn on. So we can turn on the icons. They're just disabled on startup. I'm not exactly sure why. So let's go ahead and have a look at our terminal. My apologies for this. The terminal on Debian is horrid. So we are running 4.19. If I remember, the other one was 4.9, right? So we are running a little bit newer of a kernel, I think. Certainly by no stretch of the imagination, a absolutely modern kernel. You will notice we don't have an actual updater over here. You're going to have to run your updates manually. We also don't have a software installer other than Synaptic Package Manager. So once again, if you don't really know exactly what you're looking for, then Debian is going to be a little bit harder to use just because you'd have to go in here and sort for the packages or do them through the terminal. Once again, I did install the software packages. Of course, GIMP came pre-installed, and GIMP is the latest version because this version is actually newer. And I already came in here and I did change the theming to be the system theming. It did come with its own theming, which I didn't like actually. So I went ahead and changed this to the system theming. We also want to run Evolution. And let's see if on this version of Evolution, see, here's what I was hoping it would do, where it gives me the information without having to set anything up. Once again, it does match the theming just fine on 2GTK applications, so I'm not really noticing any real issues or any real problems. Now, a lot of this is because Cinnamon itself does a pretty good job with Qt versus GTK. Let's go ahead and pull up our Qt applications. So looking at Sigil and FileZilla, once again, we're noticing that things do appear to be very good, very consistent with the rest of the system. And just for comparison, here is a built-in system application. You can see everything is pretty much identical, absolutely identical. So no issues at all with the theming across Qt, GTK applications. Now, the theming itself is atrocious, so let's see if we actually have other theme options by default. We do have, we have our default, or we have a few other ones. So we actually can go through. We can't go back to default, so don't change off a default unless you definitely want to. But we do actually have a few options here. So let's see how the theming can actually look. We have Cinnamon, we have Blue Submarine, Blue Menta. Let's go with our Menta theming. All right, so this is kind of our theming, choosing down the board all Menta. Just go with that. Let's just double check our theming, make sure our theming all looks good, consistent throughout. 2 Qt applications look pretty good. Let's go ahead and open GIMP back up and open up Evolution back up again. See how these guys look. And once again, everything on our theming is consistent throughout. Looks like these menus are a little bit bigger, don't they? Let's pull up Sigil. Ooh, Sigil did not match our theming. Let's go ahead and reboot Sigil, see if that's just a rebooting issue. Okay, so Sigil actually is not going to be giving us quite as good consistency, although FileZilla does. So we have a few little small inconsistencies. Small, that's a weird new word. Small inconsistencies in how things are running. Other than that, though, the overall system is pretty good, pretty consistent. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the theming options that we have, but that's pretty minor, especially in Cinnamon, because we have the ability to come over here, hit Add New, and you can actually download all of the different theming options that you want over here. Not sure if you can actually install. Let's see if you can install the Mint ones. You can't install the default Mint ones here, but you could actually port them over if you really wanted them. But again, you can just go ahead and install new themes for, you know, whatever these guys are. So what was that? Blue Mint, there it is. Go ahead and install your Blue Mint there. Some of these will have window border decorations and things. Some of them won't. So it just kind of depends. In this case, we don't. So not a huge deal with the theming because there are options and ways to get more theming options across the board. The system itself, this version is newer packages just because one of the downsides of Linux Mint is that it has not updated itself yet. Everything else is going to be fairly consistent. Now, the one area that you are going to have an issue with is, like I said, the repositories. So if I go over to here, I got to remember exactly where we're going. I think we're going into nano sources list. So what you'll see inside of here, and my apologies if your eyes are now bleeding, how horrible this terminal is here. You'll see here that we have Buster, main, and that's all we have. If we were to go across all of these guys and add our I think it's just called non-free, although don't quote me on that exactly. Basically, we add non-free to all of these and then update it. Now this is going to add the non-open source repositories. Debian, by a philosophy, doesn't like to do that, but it is fairly easy to do that if you need to. Linux Mint has those already set up. So there are our two distributions side by side, advantages, disadvantages. Overall, both excellent distributions. If you're not wanting to do solid customization and you want a better out-of-the-box experience, I would probably go with the Linux Mint Debian Edition. If you do need the newer packages, the current Debian, eventually they will have a new Linux Mint Debian Edition out based on the newer Debian. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter exactly. You do have easier access to install the various codecs and other items inside of Linux Mint Debian Edition. And despite it being a little bit older on the rest of the software, does give you the latest Cinnamon version, which some people might want that latest Cinnamon version. Some people might really like the older version. Again, I do have a video on how you can take the older version, or excuse me, the newer version, make it function just like the older version, even though it is, it has the larger icons. A little bit, in my opinion, a little bit easier to use. Those are kind of my thoughts. Neither one of them is going to be bad. Neither one of them, I think, is absolutely better under all cases. It just depends on your individual use case scenario. Do you want to do the custom tweakings? Do you want to do the fine system settings? Or are you happy with it out of the box? If you just want something up and running, Linux Mint Debian Edition is going to be better. Another major advantage of Debian, though, you can pick desktop environments that are not Cinnamon. If you want to run something that's not Cinnamon, you have that option as well. So those are my thoughts on these two distributions. Let me know your thoughts on these two in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave me some comments and things like that down in the videos. And I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.